My name's Cynthia, and this is my awakening journey. I was born in Brisbane, in the Mater Mothers Hospital. Born into a family of 6 children. I was the middle child. We weren't a well-off family. My dad hadn't worked since before I was born. He didn't have a very high opinion of working or being told what to do. My mum stayed home taking care of the children. From quite a young age, I was always a little bit, you could say, rebellious. I didn't really do things how everybody else did, so I stood out a lot. And growing up, this is a little bit of a challenge for me because I tested a lot of people, so they tended to struggle. So as young back as 2, I can remember having a lot of, resistance with my sister. She didn't like that I stood out. She kind of felt like it made her want to compete with me. And then as I started to get older, that became quite challenging for me. I had my sister pick on me quite a lot, and I started to find, like a strength inside myself, a care and a love. Whenever I went at school, when I was a little bit older, I kind of went from group to group, never really felt like I fit in anywhere. My perspective or my idea of what fun was quite different from a lot of my peers. A lot of adults who spoke to me, even as young as 4, would say that I had quite a bizarre view of the world. I would talk about grown-up things. I would be interested in, what was going on in the world and how I could help people and how I could potentially grow up and make a difference in the world. Kind of serious stuff, and to some people that was very bizarre. My mum used to say to me a lot that I thought too much. And as I started to learn more about myself and I started to look into things like astrology and numerology, I started to understand that it was kind of an ingrainment in my soul and my blueprint, that my star sign, which is an Aquarius that has an air element, was more thoughts focused, and that part of my purpose for being here was to be able to think of new ideas and to be able to create new ways of doing things. My mum and dad split up when I was 4. And at first this was quite challenging because we tended to move around a little bit. I went from living with my mum to living with my dad. Both of them were kind of polar opposites. My mum was very be free and kind of, say what she wanted us to do, but at the same time she'd let us do what we want. But with my dad, it was always strict, and it was always, you've got to do this at this time and that time. And he'd get very angry if we didn't. Both my parents were raised as Catholics, so I was brought up with a lot of religious background. For me, at first, that was quite a challenge, and I was quite resistant to, having to do things a particular way all the time. It did allow me to be able to explore certain spiritual aspects of myself in the way of what my faith was. And when I was in high school and I was struggling quite a lot with the conformity, even from when I was in primary school, I struggled with the teachers saying you had to be all the same way. I always stood out, whether it be with expressing myself with makeup or wanting to talk to express myself or wanting to dress a little bit differently at school, and that wasn't in alignment with the system. So for me, I felt really smothered and claustrophobic, that I created myself to be ill so I could avoid going to school, even from the ages of grade 1, grade 2, and started to, have this resistance and this uncertainty about why. Like as a child, I was like, why do adults put us in these school systems? Why do we have to go and learn the same thing? Why do we all have to be the same? We're all obviously really different. So why is it logical for us to go and pretend to be the same way so we can learn and so we can remember this stuff. My dad came from Brazil. He was born and raised in Brazil. He wasn't really big on the school system because he did like grade 1 to grade 4 and learnt things that were more useful than we did in Australia. And he could have gone and, you know, gone to university and had a lot more skills in maths and English, even from coming overseas, than a lot of people in grade 4 did in Australia. So he wasn't really big on the schooling system. Myself, I was very questioning of why were things different overseas? Why did people learn things differently in different areas? And why was our current system that we had to go to school and we had to learn this, that and the other? So I left when I was 15, and at first it was challenging because part of the reason I wanted to go to grade 12 was friends. There was things that I wanted to be part of that I knew everybody else was part of. But at the same time, when I went to school, I just had this overwhelming feeling of, well, I can't do this. This is not me. And there was a period of time where I had later been told, from seeing numerous counsellors, for my mum to try to get to the bottom of what she felt was wrong. She felt guilty that I didn't seem to fit in anywhere. She thought maybe it was to do with her leaving my dad, the dynamic of the family, and she kind of felt like she owed me something. So I was taken from this counsellor to that counsellor, sharing my story with people. I got so used to sharing my story, and even though it was my perspective of the reality, it allowed me, every time I expressed, to be able to see something more about myself or see something more about the situation and how I was able to grow and how I was able to learn. I feel like I also started to pick up a lot of tools that the different counsellors had used on me. I started to analyse the situation and see the repetitive, I guess, analysis skills that they used on me, and started to see those things that I could use in my life, and became really questioning of everything. When I was about 14, I remember when I first left school, I isolated myself a lot because I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I didn't understand why there was friends who I had around me who were interested in doing things that didn't interest me, and why I felt like when I had gone to social environments where people spoke about TV or people spoke about clothing or celebrities, it was something that I didn't really care about. I never understood why I was so different, and there wasn't anybody at that time that I felt understood me. I would stay up at night time when everyone was asleep and climb on the roof of my mum's house, and I would look up at the stars and I would wonder, you know, who was I and what was my purpose and what was the reason for all of these things that seemed quite crazy that were happening in the world. I almost had a longing, almost like this longing for home, of an understanding that I knew was within me. And as I was going through this transition, when I was about 14, 15 and 16, I started getting really into poetry, and I continued drawing, which was something that I'd loved doing. I started writing. I just felt like I was channeling information that was coming through me, learning all my different experiences to do with relationships with guys and to do with the way that the world was, and how I wanted to create something different, something more peaceful and positive. I felt this overwhelming compassion, even for people who had done really heinous things, that when I debated with, I guess, lecturers and teachers in a little bit more of extra study that I had done to receive my grade 10 certificate, they didn't understand. I would be talking to them about people who do bad things, usually are suffering, and they don't always understand what they're doing, and it's somebody else's perspective, and don't they deserve to have love and compassion and somebody aiding them in being better in themselves? And I always saw and believed the best in people, to the point that everybody else had said to me, "You're too nice." When I was probably in grade 4, I was very ostracized from certain friends because I was told I was too nice. And from me looking back now, I guess these children were told that you don't get anywhere if you're too nice. You need to be, you know, you need to be weary of other people taking advantage of you, or the way that they had seen their parents or their, I guess, adults they looked up to act was that you shouldn't be too nice to people. I know in a lot of society, they say it's a dog-eat-dog world. You need to look out for yourself. You need to be stressed and freaked out about everyone. You need to have a knife in your back pocket because you know what? People are going to take from you and people are going to try and hurt you and kill you. I know for myself, this is the type of thing that a lot of people who I had grown up with family, they were always really concerned because they were like, look at the news and look at the stuff on TV all over the world, even places they hadn't traveled to. They were always in fear of, oh, well, this could happen to you and that could happen to you. But I always felt safe and protected. And I never questioned it because for me, I just always felt like, well, there is better. I always looked forward to the, well, if there's not something better, I can create something better. I just had that knowing inside me that I was able to make a choice. And if I was a good person, I had that knowing that good things would happen to me. And if I was in a challenging situation, then I could learn from the situation. And as I started getting older, at some point of the way, I guess you could say, I had all this pressure to conform and to get a job and to provide for myself. Coming from a big family where my mum didn't have a job, she struggled to be able to provide for me. And when I dropped out of high school, I started getting the dole. I started getting an income for myself that didn't really cover much. And then I felt like, well, all these things that I never had growing up, maybe these are the things that will make me happy. So I kind of got sucked into the illusion of having things would make me happy. I started trying to grow myself into doing what I wanted to do, which from a young age was makeup. And to me, makeup wasn't about looking like this person and looking perfect. It was about being able to do something creative with my looks and to be able to express the parts of me that I loved the most, to be able to see myself a little bit closer to how maybe others would see me, without all of the negative thoughts that I had about myself, without all of the insecurities that I had about myself. I could feel confident to be in my own skin. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit contradictory almost, but that's what it empowered me. Even when I was 5, I loved being able to put on makeup and make myself feel like I was presenting myself in a positive way, but it wasn't to look like someone else, it was to look more like how I thought other people could see me. And for me, that was looking at myself in a more positive way. And through that, I started to learn to be able to, from within, see myself in a more positive way. When I was told that I had depression when I was 14, I was really adamant about not getting put on medication. I don't know why, but I just had this inner knowing that medication wasn't the answer. So I said to them, no, I'm not getting put on medication. And I started having this pull towards looking into aromatherapy and looking into diet, looking into alternatives like yoga, and really finding ways that from wherever I was at in myself, in a level of feeling unconfident and feeling insecure because of the environment that I felt around me, that I knew that there were other ways out there, that if I kept looking, I had this inner knowing that I remember describing to my auntie when I was about 16, and I had a lot of pressure from family to get a job. They were like, you don't want to be at school, you have to go get a job. This is just what you need to do. You go to university and this is how everyone lives. And I said to one of my aunties, when I had got from the library this self-help book at 16, I'd been reading through this self-help book, and I said to her, I don't know if it exists, but I have this inner knowing and desire to get to a state of like ideal happiness. And I'm like, it's not a state where nothing bad ever happens or that occasionally I'm never sad. It's just to this point where it doesn't matter what's happening around me. I feel in myself content and I feel peaceful and balanced. And at that time, she didn't comment and say, oh yeah, you can achieve that. She didn't really understand what I was talking about. And I said to her, I don't know if this exists, but It's something that I'm going to pursue. And if I get to the end of my life and I don't find it, at least I have made the effort between where I was to where I was getting to find somewhere in between. And from that point, I started thinking positively and taking great action to become more of a positive person. And before I knew it, I had different people coming to me who said that my outlook on things had helped them. Even just a random person who I didn't even realize I was affecting had come to me and thanked me and said, because I had been in a what to them seemed like a challenging situation financially, or I didn't really surround myself with the best friends. The people who I had in my immediate circle weren't necessarily supportive. They struggled in their self-worth. They came from broken families. Some of the family members had learning disabilities, or they were, in addiction. They were on the dole. They didn't really have a lot of emotional support or a healthy environment. So the environment that I was in wasn't quite healthy. And to these people, they saw it and they saw how they had a lot more than what I did. And when they started to question how bad things were, and I was really happy and I was starting to become positive, and I was always looking forward saying, I will achieve what it is that's in my heart. They saw that and they were like, well, that's a perfect example. If somebody else can do this, well, why can't I? And the first time someone said that to me, I remember feeling like, well, that's my confirmation, that it doesn't matter what happens, as long as I keep, being authentically myself and believing that I am able to do, something more. I am able to affect the world in a positive way, even if it's just smiling to some stranger, or, giving a few dollars away to somebody who's struggling, or doing a kind gesture for somebody that they don't even think that somebody would want to do for them. And sharing that love. When I was about 21, I just moved out of home with my current boyfriend at the time. And I remember not wanting to have moved out of home because I didn't want to move in with a boyfriend. I felt like relationships could be really stressful as it was. I wanted to be in a good place in myself before I moved out and had a relationship. And I feel like from that point on, there was just all sorts of stuff that had happened that was taking me away from myself. And it was a choice that I had made. I'd made that choice that in order to feel like I was loved externally, I was giving up, I guess, my freedom and my ability to be myself and to love myself authentically. Move forward to about 4 or 5 years later, I had quit a job that I'd hated after being, I guess, in some ways sexually harassed, in some ways it was just bullying. And I'd gone away on holiday, and my boyfriend at the time had said to me, you'd become a different person when you were away from that stress. You became more the person who I knew you were when I met you. And I realized in that moment that the environment that I was in, I was allowing to change me to be somebody that I wasn't. And that I wasn't actually taking responsibility to love myself and to be who I was supposed to be. Not long after that, I decided to end the relationship because I discovered in myself that I was in that relationship for fear of being alone. I thought that I couldn't make it in the world if I was alone. I had felt like I'd been alone for so long that I didn't know how I would cope. I had had so many people tell me that because I had either had depression or I wasn't doing things the way that everybody else was doing it, that I had something wrong with me and I didn't know how to cope with things. So I had adopted that belief that I couldn't cope, when as a matter of fact, if anything bad had happened, I would always have the positive outlook and I would always have a different way of going towards things. Throughout all these experiences and all of the different books that I had read, all the different seminars that I had been to, all the experiences since then of synchronistic occurrences and the people that had come into my life, what I now realize is it's all for me. The reflections of the parts I needed to see for my own growth. It's the meaning that I give to the things that I see in my reality. It's the parts of me that I haven't been loving that present themselves in the most prominent negative way that I resist to. And as I present myself in the moment at each challenging situation, and I show that part of myself that I may not have been seeing love and acceptance, the situation magically transforms. I find a new acceptance and a new reality in myself, and then that represents in the outside world. The two pinnacle points in my awakening was when I crashed my car in 2012. Me and the ex-boyfriend I mentioned had nearly gotten back together again, even though deep inside me I knew he wasn't the person for me. After crashing my car, things had changed, and he'd decided he didn't want to be with me anymore. And I felt from the moment that car had lost control to the moment that car had been sold that there was so many valuable lessons, and it was actually for my own good, that I didn't feel any loss from not having the car anymore. I learned, one, that it doesn't matter how good you may be at something, you can make a mistake, and it happens. Your life is precious, and it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes that you make are for something better that you're not aware of. There is always this invisible infrastructure that's in the background, and sometimes something seems challenging, but it's for something more wonderful to happen later on. And through that experience, I've found so much strength in myself through letting that go, through letting go of what I think I need to have in my life. The second pinnacle point in my massive awakening was when my mother got cancer, and I had to accept the choices in her life for what she wanted to do. That she lived her life the way she wanted to live her life, and to let go, even if it didn't feel right to me with all of the things that I had learned, all the things that I knew. I felt like she could live longer, but I also knew inside myself that she knew when her time was, and that she had her purpose. And for her, even from a little girl, she had said that was to get married and have kids. All of her kids had grown up. And I learnt to accept that sometimes things are just as they're supposed to be. Even if they're messy, even if they're painful, even if they're sad, there is some perfection in the chaos. And there's always something that's there weighing the balance and trying to shift things back from something dark to something light. And we are a part of that, each and every one of us. We're a little part of that, and everything we do is significant in the greater picture. So we should take that gift and responsibility and do something that's important, something that makes our soul be filled with light, and something that makes us feel empowered and loved, and that makes us really happy. And for me, up to this point of my awakening, that's the thing that I've learned as the single most important thing, to do what feels right in my soul, and to love myself, and to be able to use that love to share with other people. Thank you.